At 4:53 p.m. on January 12, 2010, in 35 seconds, an entire capital city vanished from the face of the earth. In those 30 seconds, more people were killed than in the entire history of nuclear bombings, and a city with a population of 2 million was wiped off the face of the earth so completely that satellite images showed an almost perfectly flat surface where blocks of houses had stood just that morning. An underground tremor with a magnitude of 7.0 wiped Haiti's capital off the face of the earth and became one of the deadliest natural disasters in human history, with the final death toll still a matter of dispute between figures of 220,000 and 316,000 people. Before the disaster. By early 2010, Haiti was a country with a devastated infrastructure, where 80% of the population lived below the poverty line on less than $2 a day. While the seismic threat was well known to geologists, the island of Hispaniola, on the western part of which the country is located, lies at the junction of the Caribbean and North American tectonic plates, which move relative to each other at a speed of about 20 millimeters per year. The Enriquillo Plantagen Garden Fault, which runs directly through the southern part of Haiti, had not produced a major earthquake since 1770, meaning that enormous stress had been building up in the Earth's crust for 240 years. By the time of the disaster in Port-au-Prince, building codes were virtually non-existent. Most buildings were constructed using substandard concrete and without reinforcement, while uncontrolled urbanization led to slums literally clinging to the hillsides surrounding the capital, structures made of cinder blocks and corrugated metal that would not have withstood even a moderate tremor. The country's government was extremely weak, corruption had reached incredible proportions, and civil defense and emergency response systems were virtually non-existent, a situation exacerbated by the near-total lack of functioning hospitals and qualified doctors. The disaster. At 4:53:10 p.m. local time, at a depth of 13 kilometers, tectonic plates began to shift. The Earth's crust ruptured from east to west at a speed of about 3 kilometers per second, releasing energy equivalent to a 32 megaton TNT explosion. The first seismic waves reached Port-au-Prince within 3 to 4 seconds, and residents felt a powerful horizontal jolt that literally knocked people off their feet. Eyewitnesses described the ground moving like ocean waves, with an amplitude of up to 60 centimeters, while the frequency of the vibrations was so high that buildings began to resonate and collapse within the first 10 seconds. The Port-au-Prince prison collapsed completely in 18 seconds, and 4,000 inmates, including criminal gang leaders, broke free. Walls a meter thick crumbled like sand, guards fled in panic, and prisoners poured into the city, engulfed in chaos. In the Pétionville district, where middle-class and foreign homes were located, the ground literally lost its bearing capacity due to the liquefaction effect. Buildings sank into the ground entirely, disappearing 2 to 3 meters below the surface, while in some places craters up to 10 meters in diameter formed. The Port-au-Prince port, the country's only major maritime terminal, sustained damage to all 4 piers. Concrete structures cracked, cranes collapsed into the water, and 2 container ships moored at the pier broke their mooring lines and were washed ashore by a 3-meter-high tsunami wave. The wave arrived 7 minutes after the main shock and killed an additional 200 people along the coast. 29 seconds into the earthquake, the residential district of Carrefour, where more than 400,000 people lived in high-rise concrete buildings, was reduced to a mass of rubble. Dozens of buildings collapsed simultaneously, creating a cloud of concrete dust up to 100 meters high that engulfed the entire area and made it impossible to breathe for 20 minutes. In the slums on the hillsides, a series of landslides began. Water-saturated clay lost its stability, and thousands of tin shacks, along with the people inside, hurtled downhill at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, sweeping away everything in their path. Some landslides traveled more than a kilometer before coming to a stop. At the University of Haiti, the main building of the engineering faculty, a 4-story structure where more than 500 students were attending evening classes at the time of the earthquake, collapsed completely in 12 seconds. The floor slabs fell on top of one another with minimal gaps, creating a so-called pancake effect, in which the space between floors was reduced to 30 to 40 centimeters, making rescue virtually impossible. By the end of the 35th second, when the seismic waves had subsided, there were virtually no intact buildings taller than 2 stories left within a 15-kilometer radius of the epicenter of the 180,000 buildings in Port-au-Prince. More than 100,000 were completely destroyed. Another 80,000 sustained varying degrees of damage, with between 250,000 and 300,000 people trapped under the rubble, many of whom were injured and in need of immediate medical attention. Communication systems failed completely. Mobile service disappeared within 3 minutes due to overloading of the surviving cell towers. Landlines were severed, the internet went down, and even government communication channels were rendered inoperable, making it impossible to coordinate rescue operations for several hours. After the disaster, in the first hour after the earthquake in Port-au-Prince, absolute chaos reigned. The streets were littered with debris, making it impossible for vehicles to move. Thousands of injured people lay right on the sidewalks, yet there were no ambulances, no stretchers, and no medical supplies. People were trying to clear the rubble with their bare hands in search of relatives, and the air was filled with constant cries for help coming from beneath the concrete slabs. By nightfall, around 6:30 p.m., the city was plunged into total darkness. There was no street lighting, homes had no electricity, and the only source of light was the bonfires people lit right on the streets using debris from furniture and wooden structures, while the first instances of looting of destroyed stores and warehouses began. The medical situation in the first week was catastrophic. Of the 49 hospitals and clinics in Port-au-Prince, only 8 remained partially functional, while the number of injured was estimated at 300,000 people, many with shattered limbs, internal bleeding, and traumatic brain injuries, while there were no more than 20 operating tables for the entire city. Doctors performed amputations without anesthesia right on the streets, using ordinary saws, while the mortality rate from post-operative infections reached 40% due to a lack of antibiotics and antiseptics, and the bodies of the deceased were stored in makeshift morgues, which were set up in parking lots and soccer fields. By January 20th, 8 days after the earthquake, the number of people in makeshift camps for displaced persons had reached 1.3 million. They were housed in plastic and cardboard tents set up in any available open spaces, including parks, squares, and sports stadiums, with no access to toilets, clean water, or sewage systems, creating ideal conditions for an outbreak of infectious diseases. In October 2010, 9 months after the earthquake, a cholera epidemic broke out in Haiti. The disease appeared on the island for the first time in 100 years, brought in by Nepalese UN peacekeepers who were dumping untreated sewage into the Artibonite River, the main source of drinking water for hundreds of thousands of people. In the first 3 months of the epidemic, 150,000 people contracted cholera, and more than 3,500 died. Conclusion. The final death toll remains a matter of dispute. The Haitian government reported 316,000 deaths, but independent studies indicate a range of 220,000 to 250,000 deaths, though an accurate count was impossible due to mass burials in mass graves, where bodies were dumped by excavators without registration or identification. Economic damage was estimated at $8 to $14 billion, which exceeded the country's annual GDP by 1.5 times, with not only the infrastructure, but also the entire administrative system destroyed. 17% of civil servants were killed, and archives, cadastral records, and property documents were destroyed, creating legal chaos for years to come. By January 2012, 2 years after the disaster, 520,000 people were still living in camps in tents without electricity or running water, while most of the destroyed buildings had still not been rebuilt, and piles of concrete rubble continued to tower over the center of Port-au-Prince like monuments to the disaster that, in 35 seconds, changed the fate of an entire nation and revealed the fragility of human civilization in the face of the planet's geological forces.